Hello, foot nerds, and any other beautiful humans listening to this. Chief Nick checking in here on September 9th, and I hope all your weeks are going well and you're meeting the challenge of this very crazy world in a productive way and growing from it. That's kind of the only perspective I can take these days, is sort of to limit the amount of noise coming into my system to avoid being overwhelmed. Because we have to be the people who govern how much inputs are coming in, and these days that's a really hard thing to do. So I hope you're all doing well with that, and together having conversations can help us share our different strategies for doing that. So today's check-in, I want to share some thoughts on current events, and this is coming from a Canadian perspective, although based on what I'm seeing and hearing from other people in our nerd community, this perspective or this situation seems to be mirrored in a lot of other places right now, especially a lot of the other developed countries. And so a couple of things I want to talk about. The first thing is, this whole situation of coercion to receive a medical procedure. That's kind of the basis of everything I want to talk about today. And, I think first of all, I want to say that I am not opposed to medical procedures that immunize us from a virus. Okay, I'm not opposed to that. I am for the safe and effective use of those medical procedures, but I am also foundationally for choice. Everyone should be able to choose what medical procedures get done to them, because everyone should have the ability to do their own research as to whether or not that's an appropriate procedure for them to do. Everyone's different, has different situations, and we need to be able to choose. And so two things I want to talk about are actually principles from Bitcoin, and one of them is proof of work. Proof of work is, in Bitcoin, it means that you have to expend huge amounts of energy and effort in order to earn Bitcoin that is newly created. And I think where proof of work shows up, and where I've been bringing it up with people I've been having conversations about regarding this medical procedure, is what is the proof of work that you have done in order to actually research this thing? Right? If you are coming and saying everyone needs to get this, or this is good, or this is for the benefit of the collective, what is your proof of work? What research and time and energy have you invested into learning about this? Because appealing to authority and listening to what the people who are governing your population, to what your government says, is zero proof of work. Right? That requires no work and no energy input. Right, to just appeal to authority, to listen what someone says. Listening to the news is zero proof of work, right? The news is not a reliable source, the mainstream news at least, is not a reliable source of understanding whether or not you should have a medical procedure, right? And so I think what I've been asking these days for anyone who I have a conversation with about this notion of mandatory medical procedures in order to have access to basic places like restaurants or gyms is, what is your proof of work? Show me your proof of work. What research have you done? I want to know what data you have so I can compare it to the data I have, right? I want to learn. And if you have a very different perspective than me, number one, I respect your choice with whatever you've chosen to do, and I would hope that you respect my choice and agree that we should not discriminate in a civilized society. We should not discriminate based on things like skin color, things like race, sexual orientation, or medical status, right? We should not, number one, we don't have the right to ask someone about whether or not they've had a medical procedure. That is private health information that is private to that individual. And the fact that we're forcing everyone to divulge that and actually making it a mandatory thing to be able to have basic services like going to a gym is kind of crazy. So proof of work. What work have you done to actually research this beyond just listening to what one person says? Another one is this notion, and it's very related to this, is don't trust, verify. That's another kind of mantra from Bitcoin. And I think that this whole notion of trust, when it comes to something as important as a medical procedure, when you trust someone, even your doctor, or a family member, or a politician, which is like kind of weird that we trust politicians for medical advice. They don't really know. don't trust, verify. Before you're going to do something that can impact your body and your health, verify that that is the right thing for you at this point. And I think we all need to take some responsibility to verifying that for ourselves and to just create better conversations, right? We all can contribute a little bit of proof of work and a little bit of verifying and doing research. And you don't actually have to go that deep in the process of research to discover that it's not unequivocal, right? It's not like this thing is good, safe, and effective, boom, go. It's like it hasn't been proven to be safe. It hasn't been proven to be effective. And so we need to just be honest with each other about that, right? And I think if you've had this medical procedure, it's easy to be biased to try and convince others that it is what they should do, right? Because you've done it. It's the ultimate bias. And I think we need to, in a loving, compassionate way, help people understand that they carry that bias, right? And that we would too if we had had that procedure. And so I think we just need to be honest about that. I also think another concept that I've been thinking a lot about is a concept from law called burden of proof, right? If someone gets convicted of an offense, in order for them to be sentenced, the people who are convicting them the burden of proof is on the person convicting an individual, and they have to show beyond a reasonable doubt that that person is guilty and deserves to be put in a cage, which is insanely fucked up as it is that we treat people like that. But that is a concept from law. And I think in this case, the burden of proof is on those who are breaking fundamental human rights and freedoms, right? So if you're forcing me to put something over my face, you are breaking a fundamental human right that I have, which is the freedom to do, basically to act and do what I want as long as I'm not infringing on the rights of others. So if you're enforcing a mask or enforcing a medical procedure, the burden of proof is on you to demonstrate that that is absolutely required in order to remove my human rights to be able to choose as to whether or not that's appropriate. And it's really weird because the burden of proof is being viewed as being on the people who choose not to do these things. And that's not the right way of doing it. That's the inverse of what it should be. So the burden of proof is on those who are breaking fundamental human rights, and there has to be enough proof that it is unequivocal that this must be done to the point where I can force you to do it. And like I said, it doesn't take very much research. You don't have to go that deep to see there are some doubts out there, right? There are legitimate people and legitimate studies that show that this might not be as unequivocal as it's being claimed to be. And I think that's really important to know. And the last two things I want to cover are these false stories that are being propagated, mostly by politicians, right? And it's really weird because there are some advanced psychological tactics being used on us that if you understand psychology, you see these tactics and they're very, very advanced. And the weird thing is that these politicians have unlimited amounts of financial resources to propagate these stories and to also censor any opposing perspectives. That's really scary, okay? Like, I think we should just take a second and acknowledge that that is super, super scary because the road that leads us down is not a good one for humanity. And including the people who are on board with that, like that amount of unequivocal asymmetric power is super scary, and we need to fight to counterbalance that and make sure that we're having a balanced discussion. And so these false stories, the biggest false story that I hear is by getting this medical procedure, you are protecting others. And that is blatantly false. That is not grounded in any sound science. And yet that is the biggest story that's told to me by people who are pro enforcing mandatory medical procedures on people. So that's a fucked up story. I'm sorry for swearing, but I think this situation warrants it. So protecting others by getting this medical procedure is not a true story, and we need to acknowledge that. And the second one is this misplaced blame, that this is part of the psychological tactic being played, is this misplaced blame where the reason our freedoms are being taken away and we're being locked down and things are being shut down is because people aren't getting the medical procedure. That's the story put out there. And that's extremely, extremely devious. I don't even know if that's the right word to use, but like that's messed up, because that story, the misplaced blame is we are essentially being coerced, and all of the messaging and narratives being put out by people with unlimited budgets, with very questionable motives. And I don't believe these are bad people. I literally believe they're just ignorant, and they're wrong, but they think they're right. They think they're doing the noble right thing, but they're actually harming massive amounts of people. And so they don't even realize, and we have to put them in check. We have to hold them accountable. This notion that people who choose not to get a medical procedure because they deem it to not be optimal for their health are to blame, instead of the people removing our freedoms and dividing us into these two camps so that they can create some division and gain some notoriety from one of the groups to vote for them, is like really messed up. So the blame is not on people choosing not to get a medical procedure. The blame should be put on the people who are taking away our freedoms and shutting down our countries and enforcing discrimination, forcing businesses to mandate discrimination based on something that has zero grounding in science or in reality. This is just, it doesn't reflect reality, and it's super alarming. When you understand it, it becomes less overwhelming. It's still just as scary. In fact, I think it's more scary, but at least understanding it allows this to make sense, because otherwise nothing is making sense. And so I think the big thing I'm trying to get at here is give people some ammunition to have productive conversations with people they disagree with, right? If someone is pro-medical procedure, regardless of whether they're for or against it, they should respect the human right to choose. Okay, that's like the fundamental thing to come back to is I respect your choice, and I would hope you respect mine, but I would like to have a conversation, because at the end of the day, there's probably some truth to be discovered, right? Some objective truth where we want to make sure we have the same information. So proof of work, what research have you done, right? Proof of work and don't trust, verify. How deep have you gone into understanding this? Because if all you've done is listen to what you're being told by one group of people or one person, then your proof of work is zero. If you've spent a lot of time and energy researching this, you have proof of work, and you can present that to the other party to make sure that they're on an equal playing field in terms of their data. Burden of proof is on those who are breaking fundamental human rights. It is not on those who are trying to defend themselves against being forced to do something. So let's reframe the burden of proof. Show me that unequivocally putting something over my mouth or getting a medical procedure is required. Why is it required? Does it actually do what you're saying it does? These are like fundamental questions we should be allowed to ask, and we require good answers in order for our fundamental human rights to be violated. That's not unreasonable. And the last one is really dialing in on these false stories where you need this medical procedure for the benefit of others. That's a false story. We need to target that, and we need to talk about it. And then the other one is this misplaced blame, where it's the people who aren't getting the medical procedure, it's their fault for us being shut down. But in reality, it's actually the people who are forcing us to shut down unnecessarily. That's where the blame should go. The blame is on people who are enforcing all of these wacky things. It is not on the people who are of their free choice choosing to not get a medical procedure done because they deem it not to be optimal for their health. So hopefully that video was useful. I know everyone's tired of talking about this, but if we don't talk about it, we're letting it get worse. We need to talk about it. And I hope everyone can, I wish everyone well in their efforts to have productive disagreements and to speak with people who have a different perspective and maybe bring a little bit of, like reasonability into these conversations, right? Like, don't be defensive. Don't try and defend yourself. You don't have to defend yourself if you chose not to do something, right? Because you're not hurting others by doing what's best for your health based on the research you've done. And I think that's important to say. And we need to say it nicely. We need to act out of love and kindness, but we also need to hold our ground and say, no, this is not okay. And we need to talk about this. And I want to show you what I know so that you can at least have an equal chance to see reality through this lens, because it's getting very worrisome. So thank you for watching this. I hope you all have a wonderful week. And to any nerds out there, I would love to hear anyone's comments on what I said, and hopefully we can have another Zoom call where everyone can openly kind of give their perspective so that we can all have better information, because together we can learn much more and have a much more balanced perspective than just alone. So thanks for watching. Have a wonderful week. Ciao.